Fallout 3 is the first Fallout title released and developed by Bethesda. This review will look at the game and at common criticism that was brought up in the last 13 years. Two things first, my personal gaming record for reference and my approach to mods. I played most Fallout games, from 1 to 4 but not 76. I played the first two after Fallout New Vegas. I also played all Elder Scrolls titles since Daggerfall, with Morrowind my personal favorite.
Quite an impressive collection, isn't it?
I think my personal standpoint is important because my subjective perspective will be in this video, and without proper scientific work, 2 years and about $2 million, an objective critique is not going to happen. Objective criticism is possible, just not feasible as no one is willing to pay for that. So now mods. I don't use them. Personally I never needed them and I'm not a sucker for graphics, and Fallout 3 is fine even today. Most mods have balance issues that damages the game in the long run. Also, and most importantly, if you discuss a game, it has to be the same game. Any mod can alternate the game experiments so much it could be a different game entirely, which makes a proper video impossible if you don't use the exact same mods. I only used console commands to make my weight limit higher, because I already know that the weight limit sucks and does not have a payoff like in survival games. There is no danger involved by traveling in and out of locations with fast travel, nor is there a time limit in which you need to acquire resources like in 7 Days to Die. So let's begin the game. You start the game at your birth, which is odd and inaccurate, as babies can't see or hear like that right after being born. 1 year later we interact with our father, who raises us alone. Our mother died at childbirth, and we choose our attribute allocation. You should not raise anything above 8. I personally just go for luck and later raise everything to 10. The next time skip is your birthday party at the age of 10. You see multiple characters, learn that you have a childhood friend, Amata, and a bully named Butch, and you get your shooting tutorial. Next time skip is to the GOAT, which is an acronym for a funny personality test. It's bullshit and everyone knows.
The Generalized Occupational Aptitude Test, GOAT. Everyone here in the vault takes it when they're 16.
You can choose your skills yourself or go with whatever you answered. I always max out science, lockpick and speech in these type of games because I hate backtracking or missing out on items or dialogue options. I already know that Fallout 3's speech give little to no benefit, dialogue-wise, and I focus on the former too. Before we go to the last part, we need to acknowledge what this tutorial established so far. Our personal connection to the vault and their citizens. Our father, who's always nice and caring, his friend Jonas, who's like a cool uncle to us, and we presumably were born in the vault and we don't know what's outside. The vault is a shelter that keeps humans safe after and during the apocalypse, and shields us from radiation. The Overseer is a dictator-like position within the vault, and in our Vault 101, the Overseer is autocratic and not everyone likes it. Next we wake up and our friend Amata tells us that our father left the vault. The guards beat Jonas to death and are out for blood, our blood. This happens presumably because the Overseer secures his position with the argument that there are no other options. By proving people can leave the vault, his position could now crumble. We get attacked by many guards, find the Overseer, get his key, find a passage to the exit and leave. I want to summarize the arguments brought up in regards to this tutorial. It's too long and tedious. Characterization makes no sense. And your father's escape is unrealistic. These arguments are often repeated. Let's discuss these. First, it's too long and tedious. If you skip most of the dialogue and you know what you're doing, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes till you can roam the wasteland. It's unskippable and teaches things you already know about video games. So it is long and you can't skip it. And most controls are already known to most players, so it can be tedious. But it is not as atrocious as most people make it to be. We first have to put it in the right context. Before its 2008 release, Fallout 3 was in development since 2004. While it might be unthinkable in 2021 with more than 67% of US citizens saying they play games, it was a niche hobby in the early 2000s. Most people did not play games and it was awkward to bring it up in conversations as you might be labeled as the weirdo, especially with older people. We see a constant rise of people that play video games, but in 2004 and 2008 most most developers had to assume that their game is the first game this person has ever played. In 2021 we already see tutorials dealing with controls and camera options, as these are already established. And many parents, now knowing what video games are, can help their children. But this was a valuable tutorial for many whose first game was Fallout 3, which targeted audience was about 13 to 21 years old. If you play Fallout 3 for the first time, even if it's not your first game, you will not find the tutorial too long. The argument holds mostly true for subsequent playthroughs, but not being able to skip the tutorial is a fatal flaw. The obvious counter-argument you could tell me would be, well, Fallout 1 and 2 came out before Fallout 3 and their tutorial was not that hand-holding or long. Yes, that's true, but again you need to see the proper context. Fallout 1 released in 1997 exclusively for the PC and the average PC price was around $1,450. Today that would be $2,500. In recent years we see a massive price decrease in the PC market, as the average PC costs about $800 to $1,200 today and have more than 10 times the power. Because of that price, mostly adults played PC games. $2,500 are not something you buy your child that only wants to play games. The Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation released around the same time and was priced $200, around $344 today. Even now it would be hard for the middle class to buy a PC for $2,500 if you only have around $300 over after all expenses in a month. You could only justify this for yourself and to your family if you used a PC for work and video gaming, which was only true to adults, and a tutorial aimed for adults can and should be more demanding and quicker. Even if you're ready to buy your kid a PC for that amount, its survival chance is pretty small. If you give your kids 10 toys for Christmas, you are very lucky if 2 of them are still functional the next month. The tutorial was made for the lowest common denominator, which was the 13 years old. And for me, 13 years later, it didn't feel that tedious. If I replayed it faster, let's say 2 years later, then yes, maybe it would be more tedious. I don't want to tell you what to feel, I can't do that in the first place. I want to explore the likely reasons why it is what it is. And given this context, Bethesda had good reasons for the tutorial to be like that. Now point 2. Characterization makes no sense. You lived all your life with these people. You played with them, celebrated, loved, maybe even had a relationship. The world is not that big and most of them could be like family to you. Now suddenly they want to kill you. It is true, suddenly beating a fellow Vault member to death is nonsensical, if everyone is not a psychopath. I think the main problem is the suddenly. Family members, lovers, partners or colleagues killing each other is much more the norm than you might think. At least 40% of all women are murdered by their relationship partner. This tutorial is atrocious as it goes wakey wakey, we now want to kill you. It is sudden and without proper build-up. Yes, nonsensical. Your father's escape is unrealistic. Your father is portrayed as intelligent, empathetic, loving and being on the good side, which means he should have seen that coming and could have prevented it or take you with him. It is established that he loves you and that leaves no room for him leaving you to a lynch mob, but he also should have known that it would come to this, and these 2 points contradict each other. It's hard to argue with this, and I think it's 100% correct. Now let's attempt to fix this 13 years later. First we make a single check at the start. Have you played this before or no? If no, everything goes almost the same, and if yes, you get a quick story recap and then out to the wasteland. The second point could be fixed in numerous ways. Here too, for example. We have more build-up. We see active unrest, the overseer and people yelling at each other, intimidation, bribing and so on. With each time skip it gets worse. This would provide a proper build-up instead of the short, not really happy with the overseer in the terminal. The second way is to make Vault 101 an experiment vault. For those who don't know, Vault-Tec uses its dwellers for experiments like long-term radiation, cryostasis and more. That was established in Fallout 2 and not part of Fallout 1, by the way. Let's make the experiment in this world their obedience for authority. Genetic sequencing and raising makes people in this world absolute obedient, and even if the overseer comes and says die, the person just kills him or herself. Your father and you came from outside, which makes both of you an exception. And your father helped Jonas overcome his mind control. Now it makes sense why they kill him and also their reasoning and sudden behavior. We can implement point 3 into this and make this an escape of both your father and you, and during this escape you get separated. No one will fix this 13 years later.
By now, most people don't give a shit.
But I think criticism with suggestion is a bit better than just criticism. We go into the wasteland of Washington DC and level up. In Fallout 3 we have skills and perks, with perks being more interesting. They have benefits or detriments, or giving new speech options. Skill level just makes some locks and terminals usable and easier, as well as affecting weapon damage and accuracy. Skill level is vertical progression, while perks is both vertical and horizontal. We need to find our father and travel to Megaton, the nearest big city. Megaton is odd. It does not have farms, it does not produce anything to trade. It simply exists. A common argument against Megaton goes like this. Megaton disregards world building as it could not sustain itself and its survival makes no sense. It's built around a nuclear warhead, which is insane. Okay, let's get my context hammer out of my sack. Megaton is fine. Fallout 3 is a third installment within a series, and that means two things. The developers have to deal with expectations that come from prior games, and in return they get surefire customers. That goes beyond just having the iconography of Fallout, but also how to build the world. Fallout 1 and 2 were full of jokes and references. Austin Powers, Monty Python, Back to the Future and more. Jokes are rarely explained. You don't ask, how did a sperm whale and a houseplant come into the desert? Or what does the bridge keeper eat and why does he explode? Jokes don't need to be explained or they don't work anymore. Megaton is a joke. It's named Megaton, built around a giant bomb, and the robot says as a greeting, "Welcome, the bomb is safe." We can't criticize a joke for internal consistency, but we can criticize placing a joke as a main hub in the main quest. I think that was a bad idea. Half of the players don't get the joke and complain about world building, while the other half finds the joke only 7% funny and don't care much.
Hoo-wee! Look at you!
If they made Megaton a small location with a side quest and hammered that joke really down, no one would have complained. We go to Moriarty, a local barkeep who knows our father and tells us he went to Galaxy News Radio. We find that out either by hacking his terminal, paying him, or doing a job for him. I did the job, kept the money, and then hacked his terminal. Then I went to explore the wasteland to level up and get stronger, because I will concentrate this review on the main quest. If well received, maybe I can make a second video dealing with all side quests and DLCs. But that has to wait. My exploring led to the Outcast, and raiding the base got me pretty neat stuff for the start. I raided them by accident. I entered their building and suddenly everyone hates me. I later revived the named NPCs because it was an honest mistake and my last save was very long ago. You could say using console commands for something like this is like cheating, but saving and loading is pretty much the same, reverting an unwanted outcome through system measures. The Outcast will be more important for the Brotherhood of Steel discussion. I return to the main quest with better equipment and a higher level. I go to Galaxy News Radio to speak with its host, Three Dogs. On the way we see ghouls behind a gate. If you just followed the main quest, this would be your first encounter with feral ghouls. My guess is that the whole trip to Three Dogs is to introduce the player that didn't went side questing or exploring to many of the enemies. You always find new creatures in a safe way first, then engage them in combat. The feral ghouls are behind a door, you kill them after opening it. Then you meet your first super mutant on the way, alone and waiting for you as a safe encounter. After this you will meet them in the open, fighting against the Brotherhood of Steel. Sentinel Lines talks to you afterwards, says that you can come along because they are also headed for the station. That's pretty stupid. We could be a raider, shot her in the back, or by being just incompetent could do more damage to the Brotherhood. But she's willing to trust us, with no basis to support her action. I save my ammo and let the Brotherhood do all the work, till we come to the station. Probably one of the most remembered fights takes place here, after a mutant behemoth attacks. And we have to get the Fat Man and kill it. That's a weapon, I should make that clear. After that, we talk to the speaker first, because you will get attacked if you just try to enter it. Taking the wrong door is punishable by death. Looting the warm bodies of their comrades is perfectly fine. Odd principles, but okay. Free Dogs tells us he wants us to do a job before he gives us the place our father went to. You can skip this with a speech check, which I actually passed, even though I didn't intend to. I can still opt in to do the quest, which I do. Why? Because Galaxy News has more music, and this quest makes it so you can hear it almost everywhere. The quest is unremarkable. Go to a location, find the objective and place it as an antenna. It's more confusing to navigate in DC as you have to travel around with the metro system. Everything looks and feels the same. But we get some new locations, and I will use that opportunity to talk about fast travel. Some may think that a fast travel discussion would fit better in Oblivion, as it breaked the Morrowind formula. But Fallout 2 and 1 also did not have fast travel, but Fallout 3 does. So Bethesda pissed off the anti-fast travel lobby twice in 2 different games. They would make good politicans. Fallout 3 has a lot in common with Oblivion, so much many called it Oblivion with guns. I think it's appropriate to roll out this old discussion, and I will compare Morrowind's and Fallout 1's travel system with Fallout 3's, which is analog to Oblivion's. Fast travel is the instant and safe act of travel to and from a location without any danger. Before we discuss it, we have to agree on the same terminology. Fallout 2 had danger involved, and it was not instant, while Morrowind was a bit more like fast travel. It just had specific services that were all not connected to each other. So you had to know which service leads to which city. It also costed a bit of money, but not that much. Analog to this, in Fallout 2 you need to know where your next location is. Most arguments for and against the transition between Fallout 2 and 3 are like the transition from Morrowind to Oblivion. In Fallout 2, for example, you travel by foot, but you also have to reach the edge of the map instead of a service like in Morrowind. Let's again tally the arguments. Pro fast travel is fast, simple, and makes the acquisition of wealth easier. The negative is it's simple, it does not incorporate world building, it does not show how people travel, and the dangerous wasteland feels less dangerous. The last points can be summarized to immersion. For fast travel a la Morrowind with services, some of these arguments are reversed, but I list them anyway. And in addition to that, some common arguments are: it's a skill that needs to be learned, it's challenging, and it's immersive. And as a negative, it's tedious and slow. And I think all of these arguments are true. Let's go through them. Fast travel is fast and simple. You open your map, click on a location and accept. Then you are there. If you reach your maximum weight, you can easily go back to your base and place everything in it. And return, which is also tedious by the way. It also is not challenging in any way, an ape could do that. For the immersion argument, we need to go a layer deeper, because we first need to establish what immersion is and what it does. Immersion is the process of losing yourself in a game. Your perceived time is slower, as you sometimes wonder why the sun rises already. Your concentration is focused on the game and you have more fun with it. Cesar Ojeda explored this in an amazing paper while working in the Edith Cowan University. His work, In the Game, an exploration of the concept of immersion in video games and its usage in game design, explores immersion in much more detail, and it's only 90 pages, so I can suggest this to everyone. Link in the description. Immersion is one of the most important factors for video game enjoyment, and according to his research, based on cognitive immersion factors and affective immersion factors. Cognitive immersion factors are player related. It's your controls, your skills and the perceived gameplay. Affective immersion is the game world, among them aesthetics, narrative and identity and self-consciousness. For our discussion, narrative is important, as it includes the setting which travel system is part of. This is very important, so I quote here:
"Credibility and believability are two major aspects of the affective factors. However, they are not linked to realism, as games do not always try to mimic reality. The aesthetics and narrative of a game has to be credible as to appear believable to the player. The look and feel of the game has to be consistent and credible from the point of view of the narrative of the game world for the user to really believe what is happening is true and logical.
Furthermore, not all factors has to be in the game to make the player immerse himself, which means that the absence of immersion factor, in this case fast travel, is only detrimental if the game has nothing else to compensate for it. That's why Morrowind, despite having weird animations, no voice acting or good graphics, is very immersive, because of its writing and world building. So is Fallout 2 and 1, and Fallout 3 and Oblivion fails in comparison despite having all those technical improvements. It is still immersive, I'm just comparing it on a subjective basis. Next, for the immersive travel system, as I do bid for a better discussion. It is a skill, it tests your knowledge, and that results in it being challenging. We now have already covered immersion, and the immersive travel system is, well, immersive, whereas Fallout 3's isn't. That it is a skill and to some extent challenging is maybe also the problem. See, you can't compare a system only on a one-time basis, but also how often you engage with it. After traveling across Wardenfell 100 times, you will find it hardly challenging anymore. The skill is learned, and being tested on the same skill over and over again will result in its negative. It becomes tedious. Like only learning addition since grade school or redoing the same test with the same questions over and over again. But tedious and slow can easily be circumvented. When I play Morrowind, I'm not bored while walking to a Silt Strider. I think about my next quest or my next level and progression options. Immersion helps to negate tedium, but that does not mean it's not there. Also, I think it's more tedious for non-magical players. Mark and Recall are extremely useful, as is Command Humanoid and others. By abusing the system, it becomes insanely fast. Problem here is that the immersion also loses its effect over time. You don't view the service givers as people anymore, but as menus. So, which is better? Personally, I like Morrowind's and Fallout 2's system better, but given the arguments, it's early game Morrowind and the first Fallout games, and late game Oblivion / Fallout 3's. For immersion, the player is an important factor, so it's depending on your approach. Well, that was a large chunk for a fast travel discussion, so let's go back to the Wasteland. Three Dogs redirects us to Rivet City, where we meet Dr. Lee.
You were too young to remember, and I suppose James never spoke of me. Typical. I'm Dr. Madison Lee. I worked with your parents many years ago. Now I run the science lab here in Rivet City.
She tells us that she worked with our parents on something called Project Purity. They try to purify the water in the wasteland, helping nature to heal. It seems like our father worked on this while being in the vault. And then he suddenly came to Dr. Lee, saying he wants to resurrect the project. She's already occupied with helping the people of Rivet City, so he went to the project site alone. Rivet City is not a joke, unlike Megaton. We have to judge it as a city, and it can't sustain itself. We already talked about immersion and this dampens it. They again don't produce anything, which means there's no basis for survival, no food to get or anything to trade. Easily solved by making them able to fish or having a Mirelog farm or something. Project Purity was research in the Jefferson Memorial, where we find our father's holotapes. Those are fairly important for my next critical point, so let's play them in full.
Even in Vault 101, my work on Project Purity never really stopped. Soon after we arrived, my nightly routine included sneaking into the restricted areas, searching for, I don't know, whatever I could find. It was a Vault-Tec facility after all. The place was built with some of the most advanced technology this country had ever developed. Those excursions never turned up anything particularly useful. So, one night, after half a bottle of scotch, I broke into the overseer's office. It was easy enough to hack his console, gain access to the restricted files. Most of it was garbage. Propaganda, spy reports, just plain rambling bullshit, really. But there was one thing, one name that stood out amongst all the others. Dr. Stanislaus Braun. I knew of Braun's work, of course. He was a celebrity in his day, Vault-Tec's sorcerous scientist, leaving his peers in awe of his technological wizardry. But it was in Vault 101 that night in the Overseer's office I first learned of Braun's involvement in Vault-Tec's Social Preservation Program and his work on something called GEC, the Garden of Eden Creation Kit. To be honest, the GEC sounded like pure fantasy, even for someone of Braun's capabilities. It was nothing short of a miracle. A terraforming module capable of producing life from complete lifelessness. But not only was this thing a reality, it was actually distributed to several vaults to be used after an atomic war. Vault 101 was, sadly, not on that list. I did some digging and discovered Braun's name on the reservation list for a Vault 112. I'm no slouch, but this man, he could have easily succeeded where I failed. Does his collected knowledge remain within the halls of Vault 112? Journals, holotapes, computer records, maybe even experiments. If I could gain access to just a fraction of Braun's genius, Project Purity would become a reality. I'm off to Vault 112 to search for anything of Braun's that might help me get this purifier up and running. All I know is that it's west of some place called Evergreen Mills, and it's well hidden in some sort of garage. But I'll find it. I have to. It's so close, but that's the story of Project Purity, isn't it? An eternity of almost theirs. Let's see if Braun has the missing puzzle piece.
I think Bethesda has a big problem with narrative connection. Having a researcher trying to clear the radiation is a good premise, but its execution is horrendous. So your father found out that some really smart researcher was in Vault 112, and that's why he left his child, said with no basis to Dr. Lee that he can make Project Purity work, and then he goes for a stroll in a mutant-infested city to his old project site. There he records those holotapes and just leaves them around, then heads to the location he wanted to go. Why? Why going first to the memorial? Why lying to Dr. Lee? He does not know if Dr. Braun's research can even help him. Why record these holotapes, just to leave them randomly behind and out of order? There are no answers to these questions, because Bethesda could not figure out how to make the player search for Vault 112, so they made this nonsensical plot. The solution? He could have just told Dr. Lee that Dr. Braun also worked on something similar to the Project Purity, and then he found out that he was in Vault 112. That is all it would take, not this homotape bullshit. Like most vaults, Vault 112 was an experiment. It was experimented on preserving life inside the simulation. We enter and arrive in Tranquility Lane. No one is aware that this is a simulation. And we talk to Betty, who wants to make a little boy cry. Before we do that, we get told by the only other person besides you and Dr. Braun that is aware of the true nature of the simulation. Dr. Braun is Betty and torments the citizens with his godlike powers, but there is a failsafe programmed into it. The old lady tells us to go into the abandoned house and activate the failsafe to end all of this. You could also do what Betty tells you, but that would be stupid. In 200 years, Dr. Braun never ended this, and his record shows that he enjoys tormenting others. Even if you abide his bidding, there is no foreseeable motivation for the Doctor to end the simulation, just because you made him laugh. So we find the failsafe by solving a sound puzzle. And all, besides you and Dr. Braun and your dad, get killed by the Chinese invaders that act as a failsafe.
Do you realize what you've done? You've triggered the failsafe, ruined everything. The subjects will die and I'll be stuck here in this hell alone.
You ruined everything! Everything!
With that, the Doctor is stuck in the simulation forever, alone. And you and your father are free, and we talk to him. He actually has nothing new to say. You found out most of it already, and he wants to tell Dr. Lee that he did indeed find a solution for Project Purity.
James, you're back.
And with good news. I was right about Braun and the Gek. If we can find one, we can adapt it to work with the purifiers.
I'd like to believe you, James. I really would. This is all just so sudden.
Madison, I'm telling you, this is real. I talked to Braun himself. He confirmed it. Don't you see? This is what we've been waiting for.
Maybe, just maybe, he should tell her that this Dr. Braun dresses as a little girl and spent the last 200 years making little boys cry. I personally didn't enjoy Tranquility Lane, but for many it's their favorite part. It's definitely something different compared to the rest of Fallout 3. We go to Project Purity and kill the remaining super mutants. Then we do some tests to bring the project back in shape. But then the Enclave attacks, taking your father hostage and trying to take control over Project Purity. Your father sacrifices himself in an attempt to kill the Enclave colonel. We have to escape with the researchers through a tunnel right into the Brotherhood of Steel's base. To finish Project Purity, we need to find a GEC in Vault 87. But first, let's talk about the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood of Steel was founded by Roger Maxson shortly after the Great War with the intent to keep technology safe. They took in a lot of people, but after reaching enough population to sustain themselves in California, they closed themselves off. That is around 20 years before Fallout 1. Common arguments for the Brotherhood of Steel are: they are watered down to be the plain good guys, and Bethesda misinterpreted them as such. The DC Brotherhood is not true to the lore. And characterization is bad. Most of these arguments are in comparison to Fallout 1 and 2, and in this section I will drop some major Fallout 1 spoilers, so be warned. Let's look at the first two arguments. The Brotherhood is based in California and they organize chapters to take in technology in different regions. Elders are the highest ranking members, and the High Elder is the tiebreaker among them. Elder Lyons is the leader of the DC chapter, with the orders of acquiring new technology. Lyons changed his mind and wanted to help the people of the Wasteland, which resulted in a splinter group named the Outcasts.
We were cast out for our dedication to the Brotherhood's true goals. Lyons wanted to play hero to the locals instead of doing his job. We were proud to leave him, so we kept the name Outcasts and wear it with pride. A big fuck you to the old man.
Most critiques that talk about the DC Brotherhood will say that Bethesda just suddenly decided to make them the good guys. This is dishonest. First of all, in one of the endings in Fallout 1, the Brotherhood helps the people and reintroduces technology to them. They were already portrayed as the good guys in Fallout 1. Most only remember the rough start when the guards sent you to die in the wasteland, but they later help keeping the area safe, so does the DC chapter.
The Outcasts are a result of my greatest mistake, but a mistake I'm proud of nonetheless. When I came here, I realized for the first time that the Brotherhood's technology could truly save the survivors in this wasteland. I chose to help them, even if it meant putting the Brotherhood's interests at risk. Some of my soldiers called me a hero, others called me a traitor. The dissenters left my command, calling themselves outcasts to mock me. I cannot fault their dedication, even if I find them lacking in compassion.
Also, Bethesda acknowledges the Brotherhood of Steel according to Fallout 1 and 2.
I mean the Brotherhood from out west, back around California. We knew what we were doing back there. We didn't waste time with delusions of heroism. We were collecting still glowing embers from the ashes of humanity. Before civilization's fire died completely. We didn't worry about saving individual communities. We worried about saving the progress of humanity itself.
The Brotherhood is still hoarding technology, it's just that this chapter has a change in their goals, not all the Brotherhood. And this is not unrealistic. Many splinter organizations develop their own identity and goals after some time, and Bethesda developing the Brotherhood in that direction is not far-fetched. Not everyone liked it, and there are still true Brotherhood of Steel members.
Only in a very broad sense. The Brotherhood's oaths are to protect humanity's progress, but not necessarily every human. The outcasts and members of the Brotherhood in other places consider it a waste to protect most people. After all, they say, everyone knows how to make another human, but the secrets to making a P-94 plasma rifle are all but lost.
I think many that bring up this argument never encountered the outcasts or just didn't listen. After the leadership changes, so does the goal of the Brotherhood. This is mostly how organizations change, starting with the head. Most critiques tell you that Bethesda should not have changed the Brotherhood, but then praises Obsidian for changing the NCR in New Vegas. An organization should change within 200 years of existence, no matter which country you are from. Great Britain, France, Hungary or Germany. Just think what your country looked like 200 years ago and how they did things. I think having the Brotherhood of Steel being the same and still trying to hoard technology like the sci-fi version of a gold-hoarding dragon for 200 years is more unrealistic than one single chapter having a change of heart. The Brotherhood is portrayed way more angelic than in Fallout 1 and 2, and I personally don't like them like that, but it is not a sudden change without consequences and not in disregard to Fallout 1 and 2's lore. A possible way to fix this is to make the Outcast being part of the main quest to some extent, and have more dissonance within the Brotherhood. Talking to Scribe Rothschild reveals that he is also not on the side of the people, but sticks to elder Lions because of their past and friendship. Not everyone thinks like Lions, and he also says this to you. Where we come to the last argument, they are not characterized well.
Even now, a year after they left, the wounds of their departure are still sore. Some of my soldiers are angry about it. They see it as an insult to me. Bless them for their loyalty. They're more angry about it than I ever was. Others understand their decision. Sometimes I hear them wondering if they should have gone with them. I can't blame them, but I stand by my decision, and I respect theirs.
They have a past, they recruit people from the wasteland, and not everyone agrees with Lions, and they will tell this to you. Some are more interested about the history, some only are in it for the technology, to research.
Well, that depends on who you ask. Lions will tell you it's because we're protecting the poor, innocent people of the capital wasteland. Most others here will tell you the same thing. They'll do anything for that man. I'm here for two reasons. One, Lyons needs me. He always has, just as much as I need him. We've been through a lot together, he and I. Two, take a look around you. Access to this kind of technology and the benefits it could provide to the Brotherhood is immeasurable.
And some really want to make the world a better place. I think that the argument is invalid. Many of the named NPCs have nothing really to say to you, and that is a problem. If you would be very unlucky and only talk to named NPCs that are just named but not characterized, you would also come to the conclusion that the characters are shallow. Fallout 1 is remembered fondly because the named NPCs all had something to say, like 3. If they gave many more NPCs names, but just generic dialogue in Fallout 1, that would have led to the same conclusion. Fallout 3 has too many named empty NPCs that give the very impression that they have nothing going for them. And that would also be my fix for this. Only name and voice act the NPCs that actually have something to say. Here are some of my own arguments you can freely discuss in the comments if you like. The Brotherhood of Steel is fighting a lost cause. They waste resources, and they should not be able to keep up their fighting force. They are in constant combat. New recruits from the wasteland is fine, but without prior education you need years of training before they are ready. They don't have vertibirds or reinforcements from the rest of the Brotherhood, who are not happy about the change in the DC chapter. The Fallout 3 Brotherhood should not be able to exist. No farmland, no reinforcements, no allies, no advantage against the mutants. Investing in clear water before defeating the super mutants is pure insane. It's like having your roof on fire, but you first want to do your dishes. In conclusion, the Brotherhood of Steel is fine, not good, but also not as bad as depicted by many. If Obsidian made Fallout 3 just as it is right now, people would not have made these arguments. And if New Vegas was made by Bethesda, they would rage about the changes in the lore. Personally, I like New Vegas best, but more about that maybe in another video. We need a Garden of Eden creation kit, or GAC, to make Project Purity work. The GAC does not have a big role like in Fallout 2, but it makes sense that it would have something like that to purify water. It's part of the world building, and if Bethesda left it out, I would have wondered if a GAC could not have done the job like in Vault City. To get to Vault 8-7, we need to travel through Little Lamplight. Little Lamplight is run by kids, and of course that would not work out, but this is a reference to Mad Max 3, the series that inspired Tim Kaine, the creator of Fallout. We can't judge it for internal consistency, but Bethesda in its clumsy way of execution not only put this on the main quest road, but also right next to Vault 8-7, one of the most dangerous places in the whole wasteland, according to the lore. Jokes are fine, but keep them out of the main path, and at least try to implement them somehow into the world. Major McCready, some may know from Fallout 4, asked us to save some children from slavery, after we failed the please let me in speech check. Speech is criticized as being too simple compared to former Fallout games, and I 100% agree on that. It's just asking once and you always know what the best speech option is, because it outright tells you. And also Bethesda, in an attempt to make speech viable in Fallout 3, had multiple solutions to quests, which is a neat idea, but just having one check is poorly executed. And also sometimes you need to have a fail state. That is more a general game's development problem. Usually the quest is the last way out for the plot and there is no intent fail status. But sometimes people you interact with could just not have a quest, and the only way for you to solve the problem is to persuade them. If you can't, you fail the quest. It's outright unrealistic that every person just have a quest for you to solve, or both a speech check and a quest, but never speech alone. We find Paradise Falls and need to save the enslaved kids. To meet the game at its own terms, we can't just go in guns blazing and kill all the slavers. That would work because Bethesda can't make children die in their games. Our essential slaves are immortal, but from our character's perspective, the slavers could just start killing the slaves when we try to free them. So we first need to get more information by pretending to be interested in some slavery. We find out that the slaves have colors that can be blown to kill the slaves, so we first have to deactivate them. After this we have the slave pen in our back to protect the slaves and start killing the slavers because I play a good character. RPGs with at best mediocre writing can't deal with evil protagonists. For them it just means using violence or demand money. You need good writing, like in Disco Elysium or Planescape Torment, to have an interesting quest structure, even for evil characters, but that is rare because of the production cycle that video games have, and I may make a video about that in the future. With the 3 kids safe, we return to Little Lamplight. We access Vault 87 and I think we need to talk about the super mutants now, because it is here where they come from. Massive story spoilers for Fallout 1 ahead, by the way. Super mutants are humans that are infected with the FEV, the forced evolution virus. The cells and body structure becomes altered and they have an increase in intelligence, strength, reaction and aggressiveness. Also more resistance to damage and immunity to radiation. They were made by Richard Gray, who found the FEV in Mariposa and conducted experiments to make a new race. Adapted to the new post-apocalyptic world, this didn't work out because they are sterile, as you can find out by talking to 3. The FEV was developed before the war, just like power armor, to enhance soldiers. Common arguments for the Fallout 3 super mutants are: they are evil, dumb monsters to only shoot at. They are not like the Fallout 1 mutants with intelligence, like affection. And they have no business being in the wasteland, because the FEV transformation was done in California. The Fallout 3 mutants, with 2 exceptions, are just things to shoot at. They run at you in a straight line, they don't build things or use complex technology. The first argument is true, but Bethesda did not just change the super mutants. Like with the Brotherhood, there is a reason for this. The FEV was not only developed in Mariposa, but also in other locations, which is something we could see in 2020, when the coronavirus was researched all around the world. The DC FEV was made within the Evolutionary Experimentation Program in Vault 87 that used a strain of the FEV that they modified. This led to more surviving mutants, but with brain damage. This was not just changing the mutants, it was introducing a new kind of super mutants, like a new faction of sorts. In Fallout 4 the super mutants are also different, by the way. Bethesda did not trample on the lore, they acknowledged it but introduced a different kind of mutant. The second argument usually builds on the first one, that the Fallout 1 super mutants were more like a faction with many things to say. You misremembered. In Fallout 1 there were only 4 named super mutants, and you can actually only talk to 3, just 1 more than in Bethesda's Fallout. In Fallout 1 they were also most like monsters to shoot at, with their intelligence being suppressed by their aggressiveness. I almost told everything about the third argument, so I have few things to add. The FEV in DC runs out. The reserves in Vault 87 are no more and they are trying to get new sources. That's why the mutants are in the core city, to search for more FEV. And this is the reason why in Fallout 4 the Brotherhood comes to the Commonwealth, because their main enemy died out, and the Enclave will be destroyed by the player. Suddenly they have no more enemies, but due to their being the plain good guys, they get more support by the Wastelanders and subsequently more recruits, and can finish their mission in DC quickly. Not everyone likes how Bethesda does things, I sure don't, but I don't think you should mindlessly bash on them, but first meet the game on its own terms and think about it. When it comes to Bethesda games, there are usually two extremes: people who hate them and everything Bethesda does is a sin, and the other extreme that defends Bethesda at every opportunity and sacrifices their firstborn to their god and savior Todd Howard. I would suggest not being part of either group, but trying to have a level mind about it. Enemies should be written like main factions with their own belief system, understandable characters. Every person is the protagonist of his or her own world, and the super mutants are more treated like animals. The super mutants being dumb is explained, but I would have preferred if this was not the case in the first place. In conclusion, yes, the DC super mutants are the bad enemies from a narrative perspective, but it's not because of lore misinterpretation, but more like because of lazy writing. The fix could be very easy or very hard. The hard solution is making the super mutants have their own motivation beyond animal reproduction instinct, with distinct characters and goals. The easy, but that does not mean bad solution, is not having super mutants at all. Just have real mutant beasts like the Centaur or new ones. We already have Raiders and the Enclave, and we don't need the super mutants as an enemy faction if we develop the other enemy factions. You could even keep part of the plot. Maybe the FEV was released by accident and animals took it, for example. Vault 87 could still be an infested hellhole, and you could even keep Fox, who traveled to this vault all the way from California for the FEV, and as a super mutant he can travel easily. In Vault 87 we find the Gag and super mutants. Among them Fox, a super mutant that has no brain damage or increased aggressiveness. He can talk and is a pretty nice guy.
Finally! Freedom!
He also says that he is the oddball. Like with any virus or medicine, you get some people that react different, and that is Fox, the 1 in a million chance that turned out to be what he is. He goes into the radiated part of the vault where the Gag is to bring it to us. Alternatively, we could euthanize him and take a red suit. When we leave with the Gag, we get ambushed by the Enclave, who captures us to get a code for the water purifier, that we actually don't have.
Objective is secured, sir.
Good work, soldier. Make sure the Gek is secured aboard my vertibird.
Yes, sir. I'll have the techs come down and remove it immediately, sir.
You're certain he's unharmed?
Yes, sir. He'll pass out shortly, but we can revive him.
Excellent. Prepare him for transport immediately.
Right away, sir.
The colonel survived instead of being fried like a chicken. He actually used some kind of super red X, the medicine that increases radiation resistance. It's some blood progressing nonsense that he has this on hand suddenly, and no one ever brings this up again or uses it. We travel to the Enclave base and meet President Eden. He's a Zax supercomputer. Zax came up in Fallout 1, and having supercomputers that can talk and control facilities is established in the world building. There should be more of them to make it a bit more believable. What's less believable is not the existence of a Zax computer that are made for government use, but that it managed to become the leader of the Enclave. The Enclave also originates from former US military forces, like the Brotherhood, but they want to cleanse the wasteland. In Fallout 2 they developed an FEV variant that would kill all mutants, which in their perspective also includes humans. They are very extreme, but following a supercomputer suddenly after getting defeated in Navarro without proper plot connection is a bit of a stretch. Also, you should not revive enemies all over again and make some new enemy faction. This is not Dragon Ball Z. Like Team Rocket, they are still planning to use the FEV to kill all mutants, including radiated humans, and that's why they need Project Purity to instill the virus in the water. What I don't get is why they need Project Purity. They don't need the technique to cleanse radiation, they just want to spread it like oil in a sea, they could just pour it into the water. We take the thing because, maybe. Then we ask friendly if Eden would kill himself, and he does. Again, just one check to persuade someone to null his life accomplishments. The speech system is dreadful and only gets worse in Fallout 4. The base explodes, and we get greeted by Fox. He said he wanted to save us, but he came late to the party.
My friend!
But that's okay. Only characters with good karma can take him as a companion. He's not dangerous to other people, and for some reason everyone seems to know this and don't have a problem with a super mutant right behind me wherever I go. We go back to the Brotherhood. When we were captured, they took our gag, and now the Brotherhood has to act to stop the Colonel, who again survived. They activate Liberty Prime, a giant bipedal robot. Sentinel Lines gives a speech before a few people, then everyone just looks after her while she slowly climbs the stairs. And at this point the game breaks. Till now I had few minor issues, but everything onwards is full of crashes. I could not leave the Brotherhood, for example. Whenever I tried, it crashed. I had to travel to a different location and then again to the Brotherhood. We now walk over this bridge, the giant robot in advance, killing his enemies, and oh, are we finished? Just some stroll on the bridge? You're going home? Okay. There are also some assets missing, as it seems. I don't know what it is. We enter the memorial and the control center, and I'm stuck again. No one followed me, and the quest did not finish. The fight against the Colonel was underwhelming, and suddenly nothing. After reloading, there seems to be some problem and the whole facility is about to blow up. Someone has to go into the highly radiated chamber and put in the codes. Without broken steel, you had to sacrifice yourself or Sentinel Lines. Even if Fox was right beside you, he refuses to go into the chamber despite being immune to radiation. Now there's a dialogue for this, and again nothing happens. I reloaded about 7 times, till one time I just waited for more than 2 minutes till the cutscene comes. That's the fail ending. I didn't even know that there was one. I have to reload and sacrifice myself, because Fox just looks at the console like a donkey at a loom, and wondering what to do with it. I guess I can't be smart and make the mutant go into the chamber. And now I'm stuck at the start of Broken Steel, or maybe they changed something and I'm paraplegic. The other DLCs also seem to have problems, and at this point I may have to forsake my prior intentions on using vanilla Fallout 3. I may have to install at least the unofficial patch and maybe even some mods, just so I will be able to play the DLCs. This last bit was really infuriating. DLCs and side quests will be the topic of another video. Let's put the bugs aside. How is the ending? It's kind of bad. They could have attacked the Enclave before, and there had to be a lot of coincidences for this to happen right at this moment. Liberty Prime was just finished in time. The memorial just in time is about to explode. The Colonel was just a little too late to use the FEV. A story should not rely on coincidences, especially at the ending, and I already talked in Arise why endings are important. For me, the best part is running around and exploring. The main quest is just mediocre, with some good points mixed in. But it's not so bad that it brings the whole game down. What brings the whole game down are errors in world building. It's unthinkable that nothing changed in 200 years. And besides stainless steel, most things should have corroded already. Radiation does not outright kill all forms of life, but just more complex forms like humans or animals. The wasteland should be a green hell of mutated monsters, not this barren. Settlements don't get cleaned. Everything is so untidy, like this one room everyone has, often in the basement. He or she just dumps everything in it, or maybe that's just me. Nothing new is made, everything is rusty. At one point they would have to reforge the metal. I enjoyed my time with Fallout, and I'm looking forward doing the side quests. As important as endings are, they are not my strong point, so I will keep it short. Farewell.